Hey, everybody. I'm excited to be here with you all today. Thanks for joining us. We have an exciting show today. We're going to be talking to a good friend and a colleague, Andy Riise. He is a retiring U.S. Army officer. He's also a mental performance coach. I mean, he's got some experience um, applying these sport and performance psychology principles at all these different levels, right? So he's done it as a collegiate athlete, as a football player. He's done it within combat situations and training soldiers, and now he also is. Has his degrees in sport and performance psychology, and is also a mental performance coach. He's going to be doing some work with the Colorado Rockies once that gets all started up again after all this COVID stuff. But I wanted to let him kind of do a better introduction of himself. That's a short little intro on a great guy who's done a lot of amazing things. Yeah. Hey, Andy, how's it
Yeah,
going?
I think Robert, good man, having me, brother. This is I'm excited that we're reconnected and we're working together again. 10 years later, man, this is
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, it's a long time. Yeah, yeah. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Your experiences, and what got you to this point in your life and your career.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think I've always loved athletics. I mean, I grew up in Northern California. Big family. My mom would tell you that I grew up. I came out of the womb with a ball in my hand, and so I just loved playing sports. Like yourself, soccer was how I kind of cut my teeth, playing sports, and then baseball was my first love. But football was really my ticket to go play at the next level. Like you said, I played football at Army. That's where, if everything else was equal, then the one thing from that I could probably differentiate myself was the mental game. And I think I switched positions my sophomore year from offense to defense. I was a linebacker, in football field, and really all aspects of the academy. That's when I found sport and performance psychology. It was just like a lot of people. I was in my own head. I couldn't get out of my own way, and so that's when I found the Center for Enhanced Performance, and sent me on this journey that I could have never ever scripted, 25 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. So, I was asked earlier, before we started, where did we meet? And we met at the Army Center for Enhanced Performance, right? It's the Army pushed out that Center for Enhanced Performance and brought it to
Sure.
basically big Army, right? And we went through certification. It's crazy, 2009, how long ago it's been. And that's where we
Yeah.
got connected. But from that point, after we got certified, you went on to do some pretty amazing things until now. If you could shed some light on that and help us understand like some of your experiences that you've had.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I think that was a really cool time that you and I were, getting into the field, and especially working with military populations, just because, up until this point, I was about halfway through my career. I was a senior captain, going to be a junior major at the time, and so I just come on that deployment, uh, arguably the most difficult deployment that I had, tested different ways. And, the Army was, at the time, we've been fighting two wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. A lot of soldiers were in more difficult time in terms of the constant rotation of coming home. And I think the suicide rates really were triggering this need to rest in the mention, a holistic approach to fitness. So then in response to that, as you and I know, I mean, that's when the Comprehensive Soldier Fitness Program came into being, starting with the Army's Resilience Program. And,
Yeah.
shortly after you and I got certified, then, I was commuting back and forth to the University of Pennsylvania to help, basically convert that program at the University of Pennsylvania's Resilience Program that was really designed for school teachers. How do you convert that to war fighters? And so I
Yeah.
was kind of helping develop that and become one of the first. I ended up becoming one of the first Army's resilience trainers, and so that was a super cool thing to be a part of, is the comprehensive soldier
Sure.
fitness program. So obviously, you were, in that, uh, down in San Antonio with populations you
Yeah.
were working with, and then there, but also the operations community was adapting concept, which you and I know athletes, the sports model is certainly from a development point with all the resources to where they can grow not only physically but also mentally and socially. And so, with your strength and conditioning coaches, with your nutritionists, with focusing on sleep from a behavioral health and even a performance psychology standpoint, and the special operations community to kind of really get those programs off the ground. As a field artillery officer, which I have been for 20 years, they saw an opportunity to bring me on, in that capacity to be a fire supporter and later a JTAC, a Joint Terminal Attack Controller, but also as to be able to help develop those programs at the group level. So that's what I ended up doing. I went to 7 Special Forces for 2 years. I helped stand up a Special Forces unit from scratch, which was amazing. Down at Eglin Air Force Base, and then really loved that community, and then ended up spending about 5 years with Special Forces.
Yeah. Yeah, and now you're moving on to work with. You're doing a bunch of different things, right? You're doing some coaching
Yeah,
at Texas A&M, and also
yeah,
some leadership coaching with veterans, as well as working with the Colorado Rockies. How those things come
yeah,
about, and yeah, tell me a little bit about that.
yeah. I just think I felt like when we were first met, I kind of realized, hey, I wanted to stay relevant in this field. So how do work, and so I think that. But at the same time, how do I continue in my career? Because there was no path as sport performance psychologist in the Army. There's no that.
Yeah,
So I've kind of had this meandering path where I ended up, later teaching at the Air Force Academy as a guest instructor. I've been teaching the last 2 years here. So I always knew that I love teaching. I love training, advising, and assisting. And as I've kind of started this transition journey on what I wanted to do next, what I came to realize, which you and I, we work with a little on this figuring out your why and understanding your identity, who you are, what your core values are, your beliefs, what's your passion, what's your purpose. Going through that process for myself was I think critical to understanding my identity, which is a coach, and
yeah,
and I didn't figure that out on my own. I had some experts who helped me kind of go through that process deliberately and intentionally, and that I realized that, hey, if I'm a coach, then how do I help develop other coaches? And that's really where it was at. Not only coaches from in an athletic standpoint, which is first and foremost on what I'm doing, obviously with the Rockies from a mental performance standpoint, but also how do you help develop coaches like in to become coaches at the undergraduate or graduate level, which is helping do at Texas A&M, but also coaches in practice at all levels.
yeah,
The middle school all the way up to the professional level. So being able to understand that I am a coach, I'm a coach at heart. Really, what I'm about is helping individual teams get better at what they do. And if I can help coaches get better at their craft from a holistic standpoint, then that's really fulfilling work for me, and that's kind of where things are going.
yeah. Awesome. So you just gave us kind of a background of all these different places you work, and I'm always fascinated. I've heard different versions. I've been fortunate where I've been able to work with a lot of different populations: collegiate athletes, corporate executives, military, pro athletes, and it's interesting. There's some version of this kind of statement, and I'm sure you've heard it too. Is like we're different. Nobody's like baseball players. Nobody's like special, forces, Green Beret, right? And then the Navy SEALs will be like, nobody's like us, and they're all say they're all different. And from my experience,
Yeah,
and they are right. There are differences, but from a human
sure.
performance perspective, there's a lot of similarities, right? Regardless of
Oh yeah,
the what they're doing, some of the same things pop up over and over. Like the challenges tend to be, in some cases similar, particularly communication, team dynamics. I want to get your take on it because you've worked at different levels and in different roles
yeah.
within those environments. So yeah, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I'm like you, Robert. I mean, I'm focused more on the connective tissue or the what makes
Yeah,
people the same more than what they are different. And I think the arena, and that's why I'm all about the arena, right? It's the old Teddy quote. I've got it sitting behind me
yeah,
here too. It's one of my favorite poems, and it's part of my philosophy. And so although the jerseys or the uniforms you wear are different, the and the arenas are slightly different too. Everyone in those different performance components are, in the arena. I mean, they're trying to do their work. They're trying to become the best version of themselves. They're competing at a high level where the stakes are high. They're either working by themselves or usually with the team. And they, and sometimes they come to us because there's something that's getting in the way, and that's either preventing them from becoming the best version of themselves as an individual, or a coach comes to us because there's something that they need to work on to take things to the next level or continue to stay on top. But either way, I think that's the things that I say is competition. Competition being not you versus me, but me. Competition being focusing on you and your team to work on your craft, your mind, your body, your team, to then work towards a goal where the stakes are really high, and you're continuing just to strive in that process that we call mastery.
Yeah. So what are some of the things that you're working on them with these things? Are there common challenges that you see across the board from corporate world to pro athletes to service members, uh, in terms of them achieving these goals and managing themselves within these high stakes situations and developing that
Yeah.
mastery? Are there things that you've noticed across the board?
Yeah, definitely. Like the one thing that really jumps out to me is stress and burnout. Specifically, with in business, it's very well documented in terms of just the toll that stress, and as you and I know, stress isn't good or bad. It's
Right.
and so,
Yeah.
but it obviously has a bad name. But
Yeah.
when you attribute just the monetary loss, let alone the mental, emotional, social component aspect of stress from a health, a productivity, job satisfaction, you see that very consistent within the business side, but also within athletes, specifically who get very burnt out, because you see specifically at the youth population, there's a specialization component you see within
Right.
the generation. So you're seeing athletes who are starting earlier and more often, and their parents are kind of pushing them to try to be the best, from a very young age, to try to go become a pro athlete, and then very quickly it becomes a job, and then they're burnt out by the time they get into high
Right.
school. So I see
Yeah.
I see stress and burnout being there too. I know obviously military is where and in first responders is well documented too, just because we've had to do more with less. The operational tempo or op tempo has been we I reflected back in I think my generation is one of the few generations that has spent their entire career at work, and that having realizing that I spent my entire military career at war, and then
Yeah.
with constant deployment cycles, I've been blessed, Robert. Like I had peers that been. I was talking to J.C. Glick with, he's
Yeah.
deployed 11 times, and I've only deployed 3 times, but when you look at how much time I've been gone, disproportionately I've spent more time away from my family, because just because I'm not overseas deployed, doesn't mean I'm not deployed in the combat zone. And it also means that I'm also spending a lot of time training in my off season to get ready for the game. And so I
Right.
think some burnout is a big, for me, coaches. I think there's a tendency, it's that the, tendency to not coach yourself first. And I think that's incredibly important. And that's an area that I really want to help coaches focus on, is just to coach themselves first.
Yeah, that's such a great point. It's interesting. I work a lot with the Army leadership manual and training Army leaders on how to be better leaders and how to be coaches from a different perspective than the athletic world. But still, a lot of the same principles apply. And one of the things within the Army leadership model of what it means to be a leader is preparing yourself to lead, right? And how do you
That's
do that,
right.
right? So stress management, all the fundamentals, right? Sleep, activity, nutrition, making sure you're taking care of those fundamental things, but then also that psychological, emotional aspect, which, you
Right.
know, coaches, leaders, right, in the Army, the first ones here, last ones to leave, right? They're always pushing that envelope of preparing, right? Because they're always concerned about others. And, it's that oxygen mask idea of like, you got to put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. What are
That's
some
right.
of your strategies? What are things that you've done to help manage your own
Mm,
stress? You've been in leadership positions. You've,
yeah.
multiple deployments, a lot of time away from family. So, what are some of the things you're doing that could help people that are watching? Right, they can employ themselves.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the short answer, I haven't been afraid to suck, and so, and I will tell you that I'm much a work in progress. I don't have it all figured out. And I know you too, Robert. I mean, we're always the first to best, our mental and emotional teach. Like, I struggle with being, overextended. I'm one of those
Yeah,
guys by name, and I tend to say yes more often than no. And especially been trying to live in these two worlds, which, as you know, I'm trying to be an army leader, and do all the things that I need to do to climb the ladder, and reach success in your career. And maybe it's a grind period. You're doing jobs possible, if I could say that, but you're working your butt off, and it's a thankless job you want to do. And by the way, I'm going to stay relevant in the field. Remember, particularly, I was a battalion operations officer, base Lewis McCord. I'm most difficult time of life. I've got 4 young kids under the age of wife's. Thank God she's been at home. That I'm moonlighting, helping out with the Seattle Mariners and our buddy Dr. with Mariners helping. I'm helping out with the Green Beret Foundation, and I just found myself at one point. I just was getting really out. I was starting to get out of shape. I was stressed, and so my wife just looked like, "What the hell?" And so she's like, "Oh, by the way,
yeah,
I was getting a degree online." It was like, what more can you do? And I'm a really high energy guy, and I pride myself on being an energy giver. But I get in my room, I was burning the candles. My wife was just like, you're so a mile wide and an inch deep. You're nothing. Balls are starting to drop. You're becoming nothing to know. It's starting to perform my job, not in a really overt way, but in subtle ways. It was affecting my relationship with my kids and wife at home, which obviously they're the first ones to suffer from that too. And the first thing that I needed to do was learn how to say, hey, what is my criteria? Prioritize my time and my energy, right? And and you and I obviously teach that, but we're not always good at practicing that sometimes, right? And so I
yeah,
think that I had to learn how to come up with this criteria to determine what is it. Hell yes, then it's a no, and be able with the uncomfortability of saying no sometimes, and to really put first, as Steve says, and we teach in goal setting.
right. Yeah, yeah. Like a lot of people, right? We teach things, but we don't always practice the things that we're teaching to others, right? But it seems like you've prioritizing, figuring out what makes sense. In that, hell yeah, I like that idea, right? Like what is making me excited about doing the things that I'm doing, right? I think is crucial. And unfortunately, sometimes the way to get to that is trial and error, right? Like you have to just try some
That's
different
right.
things, figure out what makes you excited. Um, Now, you brought up that work life. People are striving for work life balance right now, particularly in COVID, right? In that pandemic time we're living through right now. We're probably getting a lot more family time than we have had in the past. What are some things that you've learned?
Yeah.
Like you've had to make sure quality time is important because it's not quantity, right? Like you're away a lot, or you had been, right? And so, what are some things that you've done to ensure those relationships are stronger? You're maintaining
Yeah.
that good, or as best you can, the work life blend or work life balance, as you want to, however you want to call it.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. That's a great question. I mean, it's the timing kind of worked out well, although in terms of work, where and what our transition planning, Army work started my weeks ago, and right about the time when I was getting ready to work with Rockies and do spring training, probably after you and I reconnected. I was getting your stage about working as a mental performance coach in baseball, which I really appreciated of that. Obviously the dominoes started to fall, and spring training was ended in travel. And so basically now all of a sudden, there's a Department of Defense travel ban, locked down to your quarantine. Sorry, they can and can't do. So they said, hey, you're not good. It really worked out as I planned a lot of time with my time anyways to kind of really do an asthma check, kind of to reflect the last 20 years, to compress it, and then, to kind of figure out where I want to go and where I am now, and to see where my feet were. And it was cool too because my kids are at home. So we're all doing online. Um, people, I mean, you're kind of, I'm an artillery officer, so it's, there's close counts, hand grenades, and artillery. So in artillery, you're never going to get a first for effect, what it's called. So it's always called. And so you sometimes you shoot under until you hit the right. So there's like that trial and error. And so I kind of live my life like that. So I was over some things in terms of like I all had like the Zoom marathon, and I was like, man, why don't I haven't done anything all day. I'm doing, I've had back to back Zoom calls, and I was zoomed out, and to where I'm
Yeah.
just like, and I feel like I'm a caged animal. I started putting some rules. I started doing a better job, developing a routine, planning a day. Hey, have 3 or more Zoom calls, have a 30-minute break between calls. Making sure that I prioritize exercising during that time, making sure that I'm exercising with my oldest son. At the time, we were getting ready to do a 50-mile backpacking trip in New Mexico that unfortunately got canceled. But I wanted to focus on, teaching I wanted to work out with my son because that's quality time. We're working out, we're doing something fun. I'm teaching and we're learning. Just those little things, having meals with the family, to where we're having lunch together, we're having dinner together. My electronics down too. So, which I'm still figuring that out. I'm usually better about that, under normal situations. But, and then the other one that I've been doing is having a digital detox day, so it's like, hey, Sunday, just shut it down, because we're having so much screen time. It's not only is it, it's good to just, turn all your devices off and to really, practice the recovery piece. So you limit your distractions. How about you? What have you been doing, man?
Well, yeah, I love that digital detox day. I struggle with that. I think I'm Gen X. I don't know what generation I am, but I've become. I feel like a whatever the new one is, a Gen Z. My wife laughs at me all the time. I'm just constantly on my phone.
Yeah.
Um, so like I need to maybe practice that. But no, the idea of doing things with the kids. I did this like 30-day yoga challenge kind of thing.
Cool.
Maybe 3 4 years ago, where every day was just like a 5 minute kind of like yoga thing. And it was interesting because day 20 was when they brought this up, was like, if your kids start jumping on you while you're doing this, like just incorporate them. But for the first 19 days, they would come in and mess with me, right? When I was trying to do this yoga, and I would get a little frustrated because I'm like, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to follow the challenge. And then when I got that piece of advice, I was like, okay, no, we're just gonna go off script, and we're just gonna do what we're gonna do. So incorporating the kids has been
Right.
a big thing that I've tried to do, whether it's exercise, whether it's cooking and trying to stay healthier. Um, and then, we've operationalized our value of family by saying Castillo
Yeah.
spell love Time, right? So how do you? It's about time, not what we're doing, not
Yeah.
the things we have. It's, are we spending time together? So when we are exercising, cooking, watching a movie, whatever it is, we're there and we're trying to be in that moment with them, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
knowing your values, right? So that's a big thing. I try to remind myself of family. We have it up on our mirror wall, right? Just on our bathroom mirror, we have
Cool.
a big giant family to constantly remind us of what matters to us. But yeah, there's a lot of distractions in life, and there's a lot of I struggle with that too, saying no and stretching myself really thin. I got a lot of different projects going on. Um, so, but it's just trying to develop some consistency, right? And trying
Yeah.
to improve every single day, right? And
Sure.
the kids are great because they remind you of when you mess up. Like I'll ask my kids, uh, how I'm doing as a dad, and they'll give me some feedback, and it's
That's
some
awesome.
of it's
Yeah.
funny, and some of it is eye opening, right? Is The
Yeah.
biggest piece of feedback they give me is I'm too intense sometimes, right? Because if they say that they have a goal, you don't want to say that to me because then I get on them about getting on their goals, and they're
Oh
like,
yeah.
dude, dad, chill, like give me a break.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. You brought up
but
something
yeah,
really important
I'm
is
just constantly getting feedback and trying to grow and learn, right? Yeah.
sure, sure. Yeah, I was just gonna say, like I think the consistency piece is where I chat when I hear you talk. The consistency piece is the real, especially knowing the variety. Like I'm not. We're all creatures of habit, right? But I know myself, in order to be able to really invest in something, I have to have some variety, right? And so to change things up sometimes is really helpful too, right? Because you can kind of get stuck in this rut, especially under
Yeah.
quarantine right now. Yeah, so just trying to switch things up a little bit too, kind of keeps things fresh.
Yeah, for sure. I think I've heard a lot. A lot of colleagues have asked me, like, "Hey, how's business going?" I'm sure mental health is such a big thing, and obviously we're I would say adjacent to mental health, right? In terms of what we do from a sport and
Sure.
performance psychology perspective. I think we definitely influence mental health by helping people, give them
Yeah.
strategies and skills. And skills we teach, obviously, help with all those things. But we're not clinical, right? And so
Right.
I say yes. I think this is highlights the need for social interactions, engagement. Like what we're going through right now highlights the need for these relationships that we have, and hopefully when we come out of it, we realize we don't take the relationships for granted. We don't take the those friendships that maybe reconnected with now because we've had a little extra time, that we prioritize some time going forward to maintain those connections because they fill us up,
Hmm.
right? They give us what we need to keep pushing forward and help us, figure out, what matters to us, right? I always,
Yeah.
when people ask about values and goals, I always think about a crisis time. Like, what do you think of during crisis, right? The biggest crisis prior to the pandemic was 9/11 for my generation, and I remember
Sure. Yeah.
yeah, I remember what I was thinking, right? I was already in grad school, and when I found out, I didn't think of things. I didn't think of like activities I had to do. I thought of people mainly, right? I
Yeah.
did think about livelihood and things that mattered to me, but I thought
Sure.
mainly about people, right? And I
Yeah.
think it, that can help us understand what our values are and
Right.
what matters to us, right? And then a lot of people probably in our fields have a similar saying, but be purposeful, like live life on purpose with purpose. But you got to figure out what your
Sure.
purpose is before you take those steps forward. You know,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
you know, you brought up something I wanted to kind of come back to. You were talking about,
Sure.
you know, I asked you like what some of the things you're doing, and like a lot of good leaders, you're humble, right? So you don't want to brag, right, about all the great things you're doing. So you highlight some of the things that we're not doing well. I noticed that there's people that I'm really good at listening. I'm patient. I'm empathic. Uh, if I see my wife though in sad or what have you, I forget all the skills I know, right? And I become problem solver. I'm unhelpful. I'm
Yeah.
maybe I'm overly empathic and I screw it
Yeah.
up, right? Um,
Right.
are there times where like, or certain situations or certain groups of people where you're not as uh, effective as you'd like to be? Where if it was a stranger, you would be on point, right? Like you would be very helpful. I'm just curious about that. Like, what is that? Do you
Yeah.
find something similar in your own life?
No, yeah, oh, 100%. I mean, I think the people that you're closest to, that you where you let your guard down, are the one
Yeah,
often bear the brunt of, the ugliest side of you, right? The seedy underbelly, and of course, my wife too is the same way. Like, she's such the my wife is the rock in our family, like a lot of
Yeah.
people, and God bless my wife. I mean, my wife was I'm going to brag on her for a minute, and really she was all military spouses. I mean, had a successful career as an architect in Houston, was just killing it, and then decided to give everything up to go follow me around the Army and move every 2 years. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
I'm over the moon. The fact that, everything's centered around the home. We have 4 kids, which is difficult enough to do, let alone in the military family. And if had my wife not decided to be a stay-at-home mom and be the CEO of our family enterprise, I mean, there's just no way that we wouldn't be able to do that, because, it's just a difficult lifestyle to be a part of. And, so to be able to, we're just so excited to be able to go settle down and, but like just this move situation, I mean, it's very difficult, and I'm just out. I mean, I'm like pegging out on our Holmes Race scale. I'm like pegging out on all these scales
Yeah.
of,
Yeah.
of stress, and then who bears the brunt of that? I mean, the person who, and um, that person can be that too. I think when, or like early on in my career, when I would come back, I would just like diarrhea my bad day, and I think one thing I realized that what I was doing, when I would have a bad day and I was talking about the bad things I was doing, I was really coloring this negative lens in her mind about what the things that I were, the successes and the things about my job in the Army that I loved. And so I think that's a good example of when I became aware of that, because she was like reflecting that back at me in a mirror sense. And so I
Yeah.
really kind of had to check myself and start to, yeah, I'm still going to talk about the bad things and my frustrations are, but I really want to highlight, as we talk about hunting, the good stuff. What are the good things that happened that went on? And my wife is way better at doing that, and she's a hyper empath. I say she is someone who not only can understand how you feel, but she can feel what you feel, and so understand that, and then work like, be the yin and the yang for each other. I think has been a really important part of our relationship as well. And then and I just sucked at transition too. I mean, I wasn't. I would not leave work at work, especially when I was in these situations where, I loved living on post, and because it was so, I didn't have a commute. But when you didn't have that commute to kind of decompress, especially someone like me, I didn't have that. I didn't have any place to put work, and so it just was like, going from work to work, like in that flash. So figuring that piece out was what I think has been an evolutionary process for me too. And now I'm kind of curious to you. I mean, you're a guy who works from. I know you work a lot from home. Kind of curious, how do you handle that working from home, man? Give me your secrets.
Yeah. I don't know if so I think it's knowing time of days, so prioritizing tasks based off the time of day. Um, I don't work on, like, I do a lot of presentations, so slides and things of that nature. I wait till closer, later on in the day, morning time. I'd much rather connect with people. I need energy in the morning. I'm not a morning person, so I'd rather have
Yeah,
calls in the morning. I'd rather, engage with people because I get energized by that. So as best I can, I mean, that's not always feasible, but best I can is try to prioritize that stuff in the morning, and then leave some of the um, some of the stuff that's more mentally taxing on me, where I have more just natural energy, right? And so I am more of a night
hmm
owl. Um,
yeah,
that creates its own challenges, right? So again, sometimes I stay up later than I probably should, and forego sleep
yeah,
in some cases. Um, the other thing that it's unconventional, but I have flexibility, right? So I'm able to do things that give me energy, which is do things at my kid's school. Like I'm a watchdog, right? Which is a PTA kind of thing for dads at my kid's
yeah.
school.
That's cool.
Room parent for my younger daughter. I'm part of the
Uh-huh.
PTA, right? And so I'm able to do, and I'm able to go to their events during the day, which means I'm not working during this time. So then I have to make up that time elsewhere, right? So
hmm
yeah, but again, it's prioritizing time, right? The other big thing is I
hmm
calendar everything. It's that's just
Yeah,
very helpful. Let me know what's
yeah,
going on, with my day, and then that kind of helps me figure out what I should be doing, where I should be focused. So that
Yeah.
calendaring everything is a big deal. I have a bunch of systems in place. I have a scheduling
Nice.
tool,
Yeah.
and I do a nightly ritual of going over my calendar, and then my wife and I actually do that together. Like, what's your day like tomorrow? And then we kind of strategize as well. So yeah, communication is probably like most things is crucial, and then having your own system in place have been the biggest things that I've learned. Early on, I wanted to take advantage, and like when I first started working from home, I was like, oh, I'm going to go to all these parks and work outside, and it just
Yeah.
logistically gets hard, right? With no Wi-Fi or intermittent. So
Yeah.
uh, I do
Yeah.
that sometimes, but not as often. If I'm on a call, I'll go to the park and walk while I'm calling. So I try to combine some
Sure.
things, right? Like
Yeah.
exercise, uh, and
Right.
then doing some work. So
Yeah,
yeah.
I like that. I think we're hitting on some cool things. I mean, it's like we're talking about purpose and people and process, man. And and it and notice how we're not talking about product. We're not talking about outcomes. We're not talking about
Right.
achievement
Yeah.
goals. And
Yeah. And so I mean, I don't know who our audience, who's listening, and who will listen in the future. Talk a little bit about that. Help people understand, like, what that idea of mastery and focusing on the
yeah,
process and the people around you and purpose, and how does that impact, from your perspective? Like, what does that mean to you, from a sports psychology, performance psychology perspective?
yeah, it's a great question. It's really an inside out process, and I think to me, one of the things that I've learned is that, you could bucketize all these cool applied behavioral science practices that we're aware of. And, it's not all about sports psychology, because sports
Yeah.
psychology is limited in some ways, right? It's not about positive psychology because that's limited in some
Right.
ways. It's not about organization, I mean, all these ologies, um, that we familiar with. When I kind of mash them up, I put them into four buckets. And the first one being self awareness. The second one being self-regulation or self-management. The third one being social and situational awareness, or you can even probably put environment in there as well. And then the last one being influence, right? And so whether or not you're, regardless of where if you're, an athlete or any of these populations that we work with, whether it's business, first responders, health, whatever, in all those arenas we talked about, I think if you can develop the core competencies of self-awareness, who am I? What am I about? Why am I here? Um, I mean, there's a big element of spirituality in there that a lot of people don't want to talk about because that has to do with what we talk about. It's your identity. What is your belief system, your values, your purpose, your passions. These are the fundamental things of the foundation of who you are. What are my strengths? What am I good at? What do I need to whether it's mental, emotional, physical, social, spiritual. I think taking a good hard look at yourself, and then seeking feedback from others that are in your trusted circle. They're going to tell you the truth. I think that's critical. Everything starts there, and then obviously a lot of the skills that you and I are familiar with, especially on the mental emotional side, are really about self-regulation, right? How do I control
Yeah.
my emotions before I, about controlling my attention, about my motivation and my goal pursuit and orientation, right? And then because that's within the self. And then as I talk
Yeah.
to coaches and leaders, I mean, coaching and leadership isn't about you ultimately, but it starts with you. And so that's why I think that inside approach is critical. And then I think that another big thing that I've learned over the last 10 years is moving beyond self. It's interrelated is understanding your operating environment, which is a soft imperative, actually. Special operations forces imperative. So before any operating environment, game, if you will, you have to know your operating environment. You have to know everything from the socioeconomic side of things, in terms of the terrain, the weather, everything that goes into that affects you, and then you have to understand what you can influence within that. Obviously, there's situations and conditions, cultural components of that too. I think that all translates very well to all those arenas we talked about. And then I think the biggest thing about that is the social awareness. Really knowing your team, getting to know the people to your left and your right, because that they're ultimately going to determine your success. And then I think the last one is in influence, is understanding that locus of control. hey, if I can only control myself, but I can influence others, what are the things that I can do to influence them from a trust and
Yeah.
communication standpoint? And then, are we moving towards the same goals? And then, so to me, those four buckets, are incredibly important. And I think if regardless of what your familiarity is, assess yourself, others in those four categories, I think you're a leg up on everybody else. That's Robert.
Yeah, I love it. I love hearing philosophical perspectives, right, from other uh, consultants, right? It reminds me of how I approach it. I'm using different language, but my big thing is I call it CAC, right? Curiosity, accuracy, and clarity, right? So be curious about yourself and
Yeah,
others, right? Like how can you um,
right,
take time to reflect and learn about yourself, but also learn about your team members. And the whole point of that clarity is to gain accuracy, right? Gain accuracy in what you want in your life, your goals, gain accuracy in the way you're interpreting the environment, right, that you're in, right? So
yep,
I know we get pegged on. You mentioned the word positive psychology. We get pegged on like just be positive, right? And I don't have anything against being positive. However,
sure,
I want it to be accurate, right? And so
that's
sometimes we're
right,
in a crappy situation. So COVID-19, it's a crappy situation. So to sugarcoat it doesn't necessarily help us understand our environment, and then because we're not accurate, we're not making necessarily the best decisions, or vice versa,
right,
right? And so accuracy is important to me, and then that accuracy leads to clarity, right? Clarity in our
right,
decisions, clarity in our choices, our actions, right? How we communicate and what we're communicating. And so if we're able to, and that's a cycle, right? We're going to continuously have to be curious to gain more accuracy because the environment changes, the people change, right? And
that's
then
right.
our actions change, and that clarity piece, right?
Mhm.
And so I think in this go 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 world, right? We don't take a lot of time to step back and reflect, right? And you said a phrase earlier, it's what am I doing, right? Like how am I influencing, right? From a coaching perspective, right? Like
Yeah, right.
we look at a lot of times we're looking at, oh, they need to be doing this, right? How
Hey,
many
yeah,
commanders, right, or CEOs, right? And if any of them are watching that I've worked with, they probably are like, yeah, Robert, he does that all to me. It's like they're doing this, and I'm like, okay, so what are you doing? Because I'm not talking to them, I'm
right.
talking to you. What are you doing
Talking to
to
you.
influence?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so how are you changing what you're doing, right? And so
Mhm.
that way they can reflect. So I think again, hopefully COVID-19 has given some people some bandwidth to maybe think about some things. I know other people
Sure.
are just trying to survive and they don't have that bandwidth. But for the folks that do,
Right.
that have a little more space, is trying to figure some of these things out, right? For the folks that are
Yep.
struggling, right, it's some of the other things we talked about from stress management, right? Uh, you mentioned Holmes Ray, and Holmes Ray scale, which we use quite a bit, but some people might not know what that is. What could you explain it to people what that is and what kind of tool it is and how we use it?
Yeah. Yeah. It's just I think it's an assessment, inventory to where you get some perspective about what are the common stressors, that
Right.
is personal or professional. And in these categories, obviously, I forget their first names, obviously Holmes and Ray are the ones who with it too. But I think it just
Right.
gives some insights. It's some insights into, what are the factors that are going on that may be causing you to experience stress that not only from a distress standpoint or negative stress, but also maybe potentially from a eustress standpoint as well too. So I think it's a point of entry to have a discussion, just like other assessment tools. And like you, Robert, there is no one perfect assessment tool that captures the human
No, for
condition,
sure.
right? And so I've been trying to find something that one of the things I've been doing as a practitioner is trying to figure out, hey, things like, where can I establish a baseline that then allows me as I work with a client or a team, how can we show with a relative amount of certainty, that we're moving the needle from behavior. And so obviously the Holmes rate scale isn't really one of those, but but I have some of them that I think are better than others. What's your
Yeah.
go-to?
I'm a big, I use a lot of just emotional intelligence assessments.
Yeah,
Off of the things we talk about, you know, fix and growth mindset's another one that I use quite a bit, and that's those are
yeah,
foundational for me. And then the other one is the VIA character strengths. I use that quite a bit with a wide
sure.
variety um,
Yeah,
of people. And so emotional intelligence, I think people have heard it, right? And they understand that. Fix and growth mindsets, many people
yeah,
have, some people haven't. So just for the people watching, fix and growth mindset is the idea that depending uh, which mindset we're bringing to bear, will have an influence on our ability to manage stress or challenges, deal with feedback, and so ideally we're if we want to, the word ideal, right? In psychology, we never say anything's good or bad. With fix and growth mindset, we tend to lean towards wanting people to have more of a growth mindset. But I would say the big thing for that is if you have a goal that you are struggling in achieving, one place to look is your mindset, right? Is how you're perceiving that goal
yeah,
and challenge. And I think that's really where
right.
fix and growth mindset really matter is when you aren't achieving your goals, right? And so but that's that assessment. And the VIA character
Yeah,
strengths, the VIA stands for values and action. And so I know you know this, but just kind of giving people a
yeah,
primer, right? But those are the ones I use. They're pretty
sure.
tried and true, right? And for me, I get hit on as when I teach, and some of my colleagues will say, Robert's the emotions guy because I constantly revert back to emotions because and
Yeah,
maybe it's just a personal maybe I struggle with it, and I do in some cases, is managing emotions, right? And I think we have a lot of skills to manage our self-talk, and people, have some strategies we could always get better. Focus, we have a lot of tips and strategies. I don't think we get taught very well in our society how to deal with emotions. And so I think it has a big
yeah,
influence on people, and so giving them strategy. So that's I have a big emphasis, personal, maybe a bias towards that,
sure.
which is why I spend a lot of time on
Yeah.
emotional intelligence. Yeah, emotional agility is the other one that I like to talk a lot about
Ah,
as well.
no, right. Yeah, you introduced me to emotional agility. Yeah, emotional intelligence is definitely one of the ones. Like the EQI. It's definitely.
Yeah,
Are you certified in that? Are you right now, or
no, I
do you
know
provide
I'm not
that?
certified. Yeah, I would like to, but yeah, I'm.
Yeah.
I just use it, and I've studied it quite a bit, right? And
Hmm.
I can't tell you how often we revert back to it, right? Like, let's look back at your
Sure.
score,
Absolutely.
and we use that as a
Yeah.
baseline. Um, here's a question that I have because you've worked in pro sports where, and athletics, where there's a end state, right? You're trying to win the championship, you're trying to win the game.
Sure.
And even in some of the military, there's objectives and mission objectives where if you succeeded or not. But even within that world,
Sure.
some of the things aren't so finite, right? They're not like
Yeah.
this is how you be the best, right? Like even leadership, right? Like how do you be the best leader? We don't necessarily have
Right.
there isn't a competition per se. How do you help your clients that want to be good at something or better at something or the best at something,
Mm.
but there isn't a criteria that tells you that they've succeeded? So how do you navigate that?
Mm. That's a that's an excellent question. I think you know, kind of from the military side, that's been a something I've seen over the last 20 years of war. Especially with our rotations, it's been really, really difficult from a big picture campaign standpoint. So, like, how do we know if we're winning the war or not? I mean, and then every time you change out with another unit, the commander's prerogative and objectives kind of change. And in the special forces community was a lot of they lost their identity a little bit early off, and or basically got distracted because so much of success in a given on the ground was based on killed and who you captured and about tangible metrics that are quantitative in nature, right? And so, but the charter of the U.S. Special Forces is to really to do unconventional warfare. It's in the mission set where you're thinking about being behind enemy over. The other one is foreign internal defense, which is training and advising and assisting foreign militaries, indigenous forces. And I spent 15 months in Mosul doing that before you and I met. So I had a
Yeah.
really in-depth experience doing that in combat, And so how do you measure, something when, it's a long, long burn that's relationship based in terms of you're increasing the capacity and capability of someone else, to be able to
Right.
stand up and to provide security for their own country. That takes years and years and years to do that in some cases, And so what do you, and what's cool about the intersections of our worlds is like as a field artillery officer, I was an expert in targeting, which is about behavior change. And so as a
Right.
applied behavioral scientist, my job is to help develop these measures of effectiveness and these measures of performance. Measures of performance are the things that you do. Are you doing the right things? And measures of effectiveness are you doing doing the right things well?
Right.
And so me, I kind of methodology and I apply it to my consulting practice to where I'm very clear about what are the MOPs, what are the measures of performance, what are the right things that we want to do, and what are the measures of effectiveness, And sometimes I found that the client doesn't care, even in a data-driven world, like if you're in baseball or if it's profits or losses or whatever, that you have to have a good blend of both. You have to have some tangible hard lines that that you can actually measure and know whether or not you reach them or not too. But I found a lot of those measures of effectiveness, can be qualitative in nature, in terms of like, hey, like for example, how do I know if I've improved my self confidence, as a coach, over the last 6 months? Well, I can't reach out and touch it, put my hands around my own self
Yeah.
confidence, but I know what that feels like. I know what that feels like, and I
Yeah.
know if I feel more self confident, or if I feel self confident, I know right. And I think and that's all qualitative, intuitive types of measure effectiveness that maybe you can add a scale to, like a Likert scale to, and add a quantitative number to that too. And so, anyways, and then how you can do that is really there's definitely an art and science to that. We probably spend a whole another hour on that, but that's really kind of next level stuff that I want to get good at the PhD level.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I struggle sometimes with that. I work with lawyers, and sometimes I'll, ask them what their goals are, and I want to be a better lawyer. And I was like, okay, so what does that mean, right? Like, there isn't a
Yeah,
competition for lawyers, right? So how do you get better? So what some of the things that we've done is break down their skill set, right? So some of them are really just drafting documents, right? So then it's, well, what's where are you starting? Where do you want to get to? Give me an example of what a good draft looks like, and then start trying to
sure.
break it down into the smallest pieces. But it gets challenging, right? And then the other thing I've noticed is when you start adding that layer to it, some people tend to be okay with where they're at, right? Like I'm okay with being a pretty
I'm
good
okay.
enough lawyer. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And so uh, wanting to go to that next level sometimes is challenging, right? I'm watching The Last Dance
right.
like a lot of the country, right? Not everybody
Oh
has
yeah,
that
great.
Michael Jordan level of
No,
of uh, you know work ethic or desire, because it's just it's a lot of work, right? So what I found is a
it
lot
is.
of people, true in the military as well, is they don't want to necessarily be better at their profession. They want to be good. They want to be competent. They want to uh,
Yeah,
succeed, but where they really want is a balance in their lives, right? And managing some of the
yeah,
things we've talked about throughout the rest of this call, right? Um, so it's interesting to see what people's objectives are and goals are on a regular basis.
yeah.
We're
To your
go ahead.
point,
You want to?
no, I'm just going to make a quick comment. I mean, for me, one of the things I'm
Yeah.
really fascinated about, I've had this discussion with my wife, and then you see it play out, is like the mind of the minor league baseball player, right? The guy who may never make it to the big leagues. It's kind of like, I call it grits. I'm fascinated by grits, glass ceiling. And when do you cut your
Right.
losses? When do you
Right.
know when the end goal of me making to the major leagues is not going to happen, and I need to cut my losses and go do something else. Like I can't wait to explore that from a baseball
Yeah.
player too, because it's kind of like that's like to me, that's the ultimate struggle, and like you said, I mean, when you're out, I mean, entrepreneurs, experience time. It's kind of like, when do I cut my losses? And when is quitting acceptable? And
Right.
just to say that out loud, like, it pains me as a competitor, in life.
Yeah.
But that there's sometimes when you're assessing, hey, the cost benefit, you're doing the cost of benefit analysis, if you will, is when, me staying persistent towards that goal is actually counterintuitive to other things in my life and other opportunities that I haven't even explored yet.
Yeah. Well, I think the other thing that you brought up at the beginning of this call was the hell yeah feeling, right? Like, I'm excited about keep pushing forward and trying to make this work. And when that kind of goes away, um, you know, or do you want to continue to put in that effort? Right? And if you're not
Right.
motivated, then we're just spinning our in some cases. So
Yeah, good
we've
point.
been man, this conversation went by really quick. An hour goes by like that, but I know we got a ton of stuff to get to beyond this. But last little comments or things you wanted to highlight, or a tip you maybe want to give out to somebody that's watching that they could use from all your years of experience and variety of experience.
No, I just think it's find that one thing that's going to make you better, and try to get 1% better every day. I mean, James Clear, is talking about that in Atomic Habits. I absolutely love that, and I think 1% better is palatable. I mean, it's not 100% better, 100% of the time. It's just trying to get 1% better every day. That and like we talked about, to really invest in, your purpose, why you do what you do, invest in people, because that's what it's about. I mean, your tribe and the people who are around you, starting with, you know, and your teammates, obviously, which I hope we have a new appreciation for. And we have to remember what it's like when, we've been physically distant, doesn't mean we have to be socially distanced. And then just the process, like we talked about, as far as, it's not about the end result, but it's about what about trying to make yourself the best version of yourself, and so that ultimately others will get better too. And then if you
Yeah.
can do those three things, then I think good things will happen. And then, the last thing I'll say, hey, is if you want to reach me, I'm on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram. I
Right.
know we're gonna put that stuff up too. I'd like to put a plug in for the Texas A&M Coaching Academy. If anybody's interested in getting into athletic coaching or administration, become a teacher, please check us out. You can Google the Texas A&M Coaching Academy. Get advantage of what we're providing. We're doing stuff not only on campus and online, but we're also working with the Texas High School Coaches Association, helping develop a veterans coaching program for active duty service members, or transitioning service members, veterans who are already out, and their family members who want to get trained, educated, and certified and by our program. And I'm excited to be a part of that as well too. And then you can also check out our book at mission60.com. Just wrote a book called Deliberate Discomfort, how U.S. Special Operations Forces overcome fear and dare to win by getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And an
Yeah.
amazing stable of people who helped contribute to that book. 2 Medal of Honor winners, real action life heroes. You can get that on Amazon. Please consider buying that, writing a review, and just stay in touch. Reach out to me. I like to be a relevant and responsive resource.
Yeah, and that you're a great resource. So if you follow him on any of these social media platforms, he's posting a lot of good information. He's doing a lot of great work, Texas Coaching Academy. But in addition to all the service, so thank you for that. Your service to our country and for everything in that regards.
Yeah,
But you're also doing a lot of good work, and as you get into I'm sure as you start learning what's going on in baseball, you'll start, maybe putting out some contents, tweets, or Instagram
yep,
post on information that could be useful for a lot of people. But thank
for
you so
sure.
much for your time. I'd love to have you back at some point and talk about deliberate discomfort. That's embrace the suck is
Yeah.
my favorite phrase in the military,
Oh
right?
yeah.
And so
Yeah.
and how to do that is the challenge, right? And so I'd love to hear about
For sure.
um, you know how you did that and how the people you work with do that. So, but thanks very much.
Yeah.
It's great to talk to you. Have a good day.
Yeah. And for your service, we so many people have benefited from you in uniform, and my hats off to you and everything that you're doing. And I know you're an awesome resource. I can't wait to hang out in Texas, man. Hopefully things will clear up
Yeah,
here. We'll be
sure.
there soon enough, man.
It'll be nice. Yeah. All right. Well, have a good day. We'll talk soon. Take care.
Thanks, brother.
Yep.